Set deep in the cold, infinite expanse of space, light years away from Earth, where no one can hear you scream. The Alien Quadrilogy, recounting the ongoing story that pits humanity against a terrifyingly hostile and hybrid species of alien creatures. The series began when Ridley Scott, in 1979, directed Alien and brought us the concept of truckers in space. James Cameron, with 1986's Aliens, would evolve the concept with Marines in space. David Fincher, in 1992, made Alien 3, showed us prisoners in space. Jean-Pierre Jeunet's 1997 sequel, Alien Resurrection, presented us with mercenaries and the military in space. 20th Century Fox were keen to immediately move forward with a Part 5. In 1997, from the set of Alien Resurrection, studio boss Tom Rothman would go on record saying, "All I can say is that the end of Alien Resurrection points towards the locale of Alien 5. We firmly expect to do another one. Joss Whedon will write it, and we expect to have Sigourney and Winona if they're up for it." Joss Whedon would then tell the interviewer, "There's a big story to tell in another sequel. The fourth film is really a prologue to a movie set on Earth. Imagine all the things that can happen." Whedon would later elaborate on the matter, saying, "If I write this movie and it has my writing credits on it, then it's going to be on Earth, and it's going to be very different from the last one. With this one, I can promise you something new, something completely different from what's been seen before." The studio would eventually commit Sigourney Weaver to a $22 million rolling contract, with the commissioned treatment by Joss Whedon, rumoured to be titled Alien Revelation. Whedon's enthusiasm wasn't shared by Weaver. She said, "I'm not interested in returning back to Earth." Whedon would move on, saying, "I'm not interested in making somebody else's franchise anymore. Any movie I make will be created by me." Ridley Scott would later show interest in the project. When asked about a fifth Alien movie, the director said, "You know, I thought it'd be nice. I'd do it. It really is entirely dependent on the take of the material. It's all about material. We've started a script meeting. I mean, I've started it off, so I may as well close the door, if in fact this is meant to be the last one." In 2002, James Cameron announced his intention to possibly return to the Alien universe, saying, "What came up was the idea of doing Alien 5, and at one point I pitched that I would write it and produce it and Ridley would direct it. And we had lunch talking about this and we were in violent agreement. Then nothing happened." Cameron would also tell BBC One, "We're looking at doing another one, something similar to what we did with Aliens, a bunch of great characters, and of course Sigourney. I've even discussed the possibility of putting Arnold Schwarzenegger into the Alien movie." And speaking of casting, Ridley Scott, who at the time had directed Nicolas Cage in Matchstick Men, would tell Total Film magazine, "If there's room for him in the new Alien movie, we'd love to get him." Scott would also say, "At the end of the day, a studio has to be pleased, a core audience has to be pleased, and a director has to agree to all that. I am glad to say things are proceeding, in broad terms. It's something for those folks that want to see Ripley's journey come full circle." Momentum would slow down upon the release of Alien vs. Predator, a crossover based on the long-running series of comic books published by Dark Horse Comics. The film had been in development since the early 90s, and it was director Paul Anderson who would pitch Fox a storyline that would get the project greenlit. Ridley Scott would remain connected to the idea of going back to the beginning and developing the unexplored origins of the alien species, and Scott would finally return to the Alien universe in 2012 with Prometheus. Scott would fall in love with the material and the world building of entirely new landscapes and mythologies pertaining to the aliens and origins of man, and would announce grand plans to make a sequel, a threequel, and maybe even complete a fourth and a fifth. Fox would give the green light for Scott and his team to enter script development on the Prometheus sequel, initially titled Alien: Paradise Lost, before the change to Alien Covenant. And it was around this time that director Neill Blomkamp entered the frame. The director, producer, screenwriter had burst onto the scene with the critically acclaimed, Oscar-nominated District 9 in 2009. As far as debuts go, the sci-fi action Allegory had shown the director to be up there with the most innovative creators of science fiction cinema in the world. Having an extensive background in special effects and 3D animation, Blomkamp already had a CV of short films, commercials, and other credits that had already gained him a wave of industry recognition. Famously, Peter Jackson, the producer of District 9, had earlier put forward Blomkamp's name as a potential director for the big screen adaptation of Halo, which would unfortunately amount to nothing. The director followed up District 9 with 2013's Elysium and 2015's Chappie. Chappie, the story of an artificial general intelligence law enforcement robot captured and taught by gangsters, would feature Sigourney Weaver, leading the director to reveal to her that he was a self-confessed fan and that the first movie he ever became enamored with was Alien.
You know, ironically, I think the first science fiction film I remember seeing is Alien. And it was in a coastal town in South Africa that we used to have like a sort of holiday flat in, called Umhlanga. It's next to Durban. And I saw, like, I was really young. I mean, I was probably 6 or 5. And I saw maybe 40 minutes of it. And then my family wanted to go down to the beach, and I basically like spazzed like fully because I just wanted to keep watching it. And then over the years, I found out that there's a VHS machine in the bottom of the apartment block that the woman at the base of the building would like cycle films that were filtered through all of the different flats. And I was like, what is that you were playing? You know, it took me like 2 years to actually get to the bottom of it, like this pre-internet, like super young phase. So yeah, it was Alien. I had no idea what it was.
And were you terrified by it then?
I saw everything up until the chest bursting scene, right? So most of it, like my memory of it, was in the ship with the eggs and the space jockey. Like that was the imagery that you know, and then I didn't see it again. Like it was 40 minutes, and then I just never saw it for like several years. So I did. The scary factor wasn't in there yet.
On New Year's Day 2015, Neill Blomkamp released some Alien Universe artwork in a commissioned work by Geoffroy Thorenz, a talented illustrator, concept artist, and painter. Blomkamp described the artwork as taking a mental stroll into the world Ridley Scott created. He didn't initially elaborate as to whether this was an officially sanctioned project or simply work he was doing as a fan. A representative from Fox confirmed that this was a project Blomkamp undertook on his own, as there was, at the time, no deal in place between the studio and the director. Blomkamp would also say, "I just sort of self-funded the artists to work on the artwork." The speculative art seemed to take place in a world where the event of Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection never happened. Hicks' facial wound was clearly a continuation from the end of Aliens, but remembering the character had been declared dead at the start of number 3, speculation mounted over how Blomkamp would, hypothetically, resurrect the character. There was also designs by artist Doug Williams of what appeared to be Ripley in a sort of battlesuit and helmet, and of a new style of facehugger. The facehugger was originally done back in 2012 as Prometheus fan art, but Blomkamp later released it alongside his Alien 5 artwork, which seems to imply that he had hired Williams for the project. The art would instantly begin trending around the world and would generate an online buzz that prompted Blomkamp to address the situation on Twitter, saying, "P.S. This has nothing to do with the studio. I just feel like I might do something else instead. In which case, why not show some work?" Sigourney Weaver would say, "After repeatedly discussing another film's potential, I finally said, you know, it's a pity we didn't really finish the story. It's such a good story. It's really loved," I said. "I should probably talk to Jim Cameron about that." And he said, "Don't talk to Jim Cameron about that. Talk to me about that." So we kept talking about it. Blomkamp's public pitch seemed to do the trick as a new headline broke that a new Alien sequel was officially in the works, to be directed by Neill Blomkamp. Fox had called him in for a meeting and the deal had been struck. Blomkamp would hire frequent collaborator Philip Ivey as his production designer, and a phase of design and pre-production would officially begin. In February 2015, Blomkamp took to Instagram to say, "So I think this is officially my next film."
Alien is a long-standing franchise. Is it just because you had a great idea that you came up with that you pursued them, or?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely, I pursued them to the point that Fox didn't even know I was working on it. So, that in itself is just unique. Like, you should always be working on something that the studio doesn't even know you're doing, and that way you're like, I want to do that by the time it's done, and then they can decide. You know?
Yeah.
I think when you get hired to do something, you're in dangerous territory. But so. The truth about, projects that are my own, like the thing that's annoying about films is they take 3 years to make. It's a constant thing that I face all the time, which is like whatever you commit to, you're going to be out of the game with everything else, and you're going to be doing this one thing for that amount of time. So that's a very true thing. I mean, that would still be my answer with almost everything. It's just that Alien isn't almost everything. Alien is like the one thing that's just. I actually think it's the first science fiction film I ever saw.
Right.
And it's my first memory of like film. And so it's just emblazoned into my head in a way that it would be a shame for me to not do it for myself, I'll even if it doesn't live up to what people want, like for my own self, like sure. I need to at least try. I think that the combination of what Ridley did and the usage of Giger's Freudian sexual terror imagery, and the setup of the first film, and then what Cameron did with the second film, like just the perfect storm of what those ingredients were, and for my own like visual style and what I like, and it just was this weird, perfect unity of everything, and I think that's really what it is. It's just I can't think of anything that comes close to it in terms of an existing franchise. Alien is a unique thing for me. It's a unique storm of perfect ingredients. I think that people think I was like playing some kind of game with the studio where I was like releasing stuff to try to create hype to try to go back to them, and like I'm totally not Machiavellian in that way at all. Like I'm just not. And that's what Alien was, where I was like, maybe I should just go off for a couple of years and do some other stuff. And I had all of this accumulated work of a project I thought was really awesome. So I was like, I know there's going to be some fans out there that like this. Here you go. You know what I mean? And my apprehension with Alien was that I had never worked with someone else's material, and especially not even someone else. At this point, it was like, I'm going to count Fincher in with the third one, even though the third one I don't like as much as the first two. It's still 3 awesome filmmakers. So it's not about living up to it and being nervous about it. It's like, I just don't want other people to tell me what to do, which is a different thing. Yeah. Well, we think in this film this should happen because it happened in that one. That kind of scared me a little bit. So then I was like, I'm just not going to do it. I'll put it out. Yeah. But then, I spoke to Sigourney, and like she was. I love Sigourney and her wanting to execute the story that I wrote, and she thinks it's the right story for Ripley. That I was like, no, I'm fully going to do this.
20th Century Fox confirmed they had closed a deal with the director, and that the, as yet, untitled sci-fi project was separate from Prometheus 2, which Fox was still making with Ridley Scott.
That Neill, who is very, very cool and not fazed by anything, the moment Sigourney walked on set, it was literally like, that's Ripley, that's Ripley, that's Ripley. Like, I don't know how long, but it was, you were a bit of a fanboy.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it is. I was saying to Shaw like recently about how things. I'm really sort of non-self-reflective, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking. I don't feel like I take enough time to really be sort of thankful for things in general, and it's kind of ridiculous that I mean, even aside from Alien, just Sigourney being involved in this film, where you're like a struggling artist trying to get into films when you're younger, and it's like just getting any film made is difficult, but to have someone in it that was connected to one of my favorite pieces of art ever I need to be in touch with that more, and I'm not really. I kind of just like motor through things too much. So yeah, I mean, Alien it's insane that is a possibility.
How big a possibility is it?
Very, very big. Very big. Yeah.
I mean, you say possibility. Yeah. I think it's happening.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Let's just put it this way: that we found the host, and it's been embedded.
Gestating, yeah.
The news was officially announced that month that the Ridley Scott Creative Group would carry production, with Ridley Scott as a producer and Blomkamp in the director's chair working from his own screenplay. The Alien 5 project would carry the working title Red Harvest, in what was seen as likely to be a nod to Blue Harvest, the fake working title to Return of the Jedi.
Yes, there is an incredible script written and to be directed by Neill Blomkamp, who was a fan growing up in South Africa who loved these movies so much that he broke the tapes. And when we were working together on Chappie, a movie I love, we started chatting about how the series left Ripley. And I had not wanted to do a fifth one. I didn't want to go to Earth. I thought going to Earth was like
back in the pit or something.
A little boring. So anyway, that whole first day we started just talking about it, and 4 months later I got a script that was so amazing, and it gives the fans everything they are looking for, plus innovates in a lot of ways with things that just immediately for me became part of the world. So he has work to do, I have work to do, and I'm hoping when we finish those jobs we'll circle back and start to do it. So thanks for asking.
Talk of the proposed new entry into the Alien series would continue to arise in many of the interviews Blomkamp and Weaver would do when promoting the release of Chappie.
We have a new Alien movie coming out with Neill. You're the head of it. Sigourney, you're coming back. Give us a little. What can the fans expect?
I don't want to give too much away. It's just early days. I'll say I'm extremely excited. I cannot believe Sigourney's in it. I want it to feel like Alien 1 and Alien 2. And that is all.
But I would add that probably the alien is going to be in it as well. Yeah.
Let's assume that there will be a xenomorph in the film.
A xenomorph. Could you explain that for the crowd, just in case?
For anyone who isn't a fan or doesn't know the Alien franchise well, a xenomorph is what they refer to the alien as.
Thank you, Neill.
It's very, very serious.
I've got to ask you about Alien. Like, do you feel kind of nervous taking on like this kind of franchise that you love so much? In it?
No. I don't. Right now, whatever phase I'm in my career, I don't feel that. I don't feel that. You know, like the idea of artists that get caught up in, if they've had previous success and then they're like, well, I'm so scared to put something out now, what if it doesn't live up to it? You know, I don't feel that. And in terms of taking on stuff like Alien, I don't feel the negatives either. I think if you're ever going to do good work, you just have to like go out and like, you know, swing large swings and just be committed and love what you're doing. So I feel the good pressure, meaning as a massive fan of those movies, I want to make a film that I, as a fan, would love. And I think that I'm ill-suited to other franchises. I think that there are many other franchises where I would want to turn it upside down and like totally just screw with it. And Alien isn't one of them. Alien is like, I want to do my best to sort of honor the lineage of the first two movies and give fans like myself what I think we deserve from where it went off the rails.
In July 2015, further art appeared on Instagram. This piece, featuring Ripley and a battle-scarred Hicks, is titled Mercenaries, and was released alongside the message, Alien going very well. The artwork of Hicks tended to raise more questions than it answered. The majority of fans were now curious as to whether or not Alien would be playing out a retroactive continuity which would mean Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection never happened, or whether those stories were the events of one of Ripley's nightmares in cryosleep, or if it would be a time travel / wormhole plot, or just simply a parallel universe. Either way, lots of people were excited by the prospect of bringing back Hicks, as naturally, this would mean a return to the Alien universe for actor and fan favourite Michael Biehn.
My question is, what's going on with Alien 5?
We're fucking dead.
It's such a brilliant script, and Neill Blomkamp has every intention of doing it. We were asked to wait while Ridley Scott does his Prometheus movie because, understandably, they didn't want both movies coming out at the same time. So I think now Neill is directing Gone World, and I have a little thing called Avatar to do. But then we're going to do it. Michael is not dead. He's going to be in it with me. I'm so excited about it.
The idea of an entire armada of colonial marines and mercenaries in the year 2204, led by Corporal Dwayne Hicks as they confronted Weyland Yutani and waged war against genetically modified aliens, was becoming more and more appealing by the day. In an interview, Biehn would say, "They're talking about doing another Aliens movie with Neill Blomkamp, and Fox came and announced it, and Sigourney has come out and announced it. The basic idea is acting like Alien 3 and 4 never existed. I know Ridley Scott is doing his movie first and is going to be the executive producer on this one, so I'm really looking forward to that. I know that Ridley's focus is on the second Prometheus, and I'm sure that he and Fox both don't want that and Neill's movie to come out right next to each other, because they're kind of two different worlds, with Aliens taking place thousands of years later, which is how they explained it all to me. But at the same time, they want to give them a similar feel. I know they're putting the brakes on Neill's movie just for a little while." Biehn then made a post to Facebook stating that he was purely speculating what the plot could be, and obviously if he knew the plot, as a professional actor, he wouldn't do such a thing before a movie was released.
I have to ask this though, because there's been yes/no rumors. The next Aliens, are you coming back as Hicks? There's a fan art.
If Neill Blomkamp, Neill Blomkamp and Sigourney get to make their movie, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what will happen is that they will bring back Newt also. Newt will be 26, 27. They'll get some great actress for, wonderful actress for that. But right now, Ridley Scott is doing Aliens, The Covenant, or something like that.
So if this proceeds, if this continues,
from what, if you dig deep enough into Ridley's
interviews
and so on and so forth, you get the feeling that he's going to do his, and once he's finished with his, then they're going to let Neill do his,
and Neill had to change a few things to compromise that.
And Neill's got the one that Sigourney really wants to finish up with, and I think there'll be kind of a passing of the torch between. That's my guess. I haven't even seen the script, to tell you the truth. I've talked to Neill, and they were moving ahead with it, and then Ridley decided, I think, that he wanted to get get his in there first. And so if they make Neill's, and they should, because he's a brilliant filmmaker, and I think they owe it to Sigourney, and they've already announced they're going to make it, so I think it'd be a true embarrassment to Fox if they'd never made the movie. I'll be in it.
Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, known as ADI, are responsible for the practical alien creature effects on Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection and the Alien vs. Predator films. They would take one of the concepts Blomkamp had shared and turn it into a physical reality. The makeup test was done by David Woodruff, and the man in the makeup, standing in for Hicks, is his father, Tom Woodruff. And the armor is actually Michael Biehn's armor from Aliens. Woodruff Jr. did the makeup test through his company, Generation Effects Incorporated, saying, "This Neill Blomkamp project is the first possibility I've seen or heard of another Alien film, and I'm all about it. I know the guys at Amalgamated Dynamics are pushing for something like this too. It's time." Plot details were still non-existent beyond guesswork and speculation from the artwork, as both Weaver and Blomkamp were happy to confirm the project was still proceeding, but were somewhat shy about revealing too much too soon.
Alien, you said it's too early to say too much, but you're going to be a part of it.
Yes, yes. We've been talking about it for a year, and actually it's been a huge secret to keep, you know. So,
no secrets anymore.
No secrets anymore, and I think we're both delighted, and I can't think of a director I would trust more with this. I hate to call it a franchise, because it sounds like French fries or something, but with this story, and telling the ending of the story, which I could never figure out how it should end, and I never wanted to do just another one to do it, so I feel that this was meant to be.
And you'll be doing Alien next, and you worked with the star Sigourney for this film. So did your time with Sigourney on the set of Chappie kind of influence your ideas for the next Alien?
Totally. Speaking to her made me understand her point of view on Ripley, and also how she felt about the whole franchise in general. So that led to a whole bunch of ideas.
There was also a brief flirtation with the idea of the film being broken into two parts, after Blomkamp told Empire, "The first two are the ones that I care about." Then I started to realize there was a whole film, at least a film if not more, that still contained Ripley, which I was really surprised by. In October 2015, Blomkamp released a photograph of a pulse rifle, with a strong hint that it would appear in the upcoming film. Yet, soon to follow was a tweet from the director stating the project was now on hold, pending Prometheus 2. In April 2016, we saw more concept art. This image featuring a grown-up version of Newt from Aliens. It was seen that this all but confirmed the inclusion of the character in Blomkamp's film, and that as a direct sequel to Aliens, the events of Part 3 would be erased from the continuity. Despite the uncertainty of whether or not production would proceed, Sigourney Weaver would tell Entertainment Tonight that it's just as if, you know, the path forks and one direction goes off to 3 and 4 and another direction goes off to Neill's movie. So it was now clear that Blomkamp's Alien movie would veer off on a divergent chronology, and Weaver also suggested that the Alien sequel would delve into the motivation of the aliens themselves, exploring what it is their race has been seeking. She said, "The script itself has so much in it that's so original, but also really satisfies I would say, the primal needs of the aliens. It's a tribute to all of the great work that the other directors have done, in a way, but goes in a completely new direction. I hope we'll do it." It's at this point all talk of the project seemed to stall. Ridley Scott would confirm that he'd seen a draft of Alien 5, and it was still on course for a 2017 release, and that he was concentrating all of his energy into prepping his Prometheus sequel, Alien: Paradise Lost, later retitled Alien Covenant.
You've made comments on Blomkamp's Alien 5 that they were working on, of course, which would have continued the Ripley story.
Yeah.
Have you had any thoughts at all on perhaps kind of bridging the prequels and the original film? Ever thought about maybe de-aging people like Sigourney, as they do in a lot of films at the moment?
Well, I think that's not a particularly new idea, first of all. Secondly, I think they cooked it, put an orange in his mouth with crackling on his back, frankly, when they did Alien vs. Predator.
Yeah, the least said about that, the better.
Yikes. So I think you want to keep, once you've got something really good done, spread it around. And I think I was part of the process with that with Blomkamp, and I was going to be in there as a producer. Said, yeah, by all means. But there was no real script came out, and I was doing my other thing. So if Fox is the one who decided not to, so, don't know. I think we've got, this is enough. Just keep going down this route.
Ridley Scott would begin to publicly play down his involvement in the new Part 5. It seemed as if Scott felt the sequel to Aliens would somewhat distract from his own direction for the Alien universe, and so Alien 5 was put on ice, so Scott could prioritize the completion and release of his own sequel.
What I've been wondering is, what is your relationship with Neill Blomkamp like? There's been a lot of rumors circling around that he had to scrap his Alien movie, his version of the Alien universe, for you to gain back control of your version.
Really? Who said that? Whoa. Not only that, I did the first one, so I don't really give a shit. You know, I really don't care. Excuse me? Right.
Okay, okay.
In an extended podcast interview with IGN whilst promoting Alien Covenant, Scott would, in referencing Alien 5's postponed production, reveal Blomkamp's working title of Alien Awakening.
They wanted to do Alien, what was it? Awakening? Blomkamp.
Yeah.
I said, fine, I was going to be the producer.
Yeah.
If I could have, I would have. Except I do question, why have both out there?
Yeah.
Seems like shooting your big toe off.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But they didn't go forward with it, Fox.
Yeah.
So I kind of just kept out of it.
So
I mean, I'd literally ignited
yeah.
this thing to bring it off the ground again because it was lying there in dormant on a
Yeah.
shelf. And I had this thing to bring it back up, and here we are. I was obviously being, encouraging, saying, yeah, by all means. And Fox saying, do you want to produce it? Yeah, of course. But it didn't really, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
It didn't evolve. I think it was Neill with Sigourney, because Neill
Yeah.
had done something with Sigourney.
That's right, yeah, she's in Chappie, another film of his. Yeah.
Chappie, yeah, correct.
In October 2017, Scott spoke of his intention for a sequel to Alien Covenant, saying, I think the evolution of the alien himself is nearly over, but what I was trying to do was transcend and move to another story, which would be taken over by AIs. The world that the AI might create as a leader if he finds himself on a new planet. We have actually quite a big layout for the next one. As time passed, Scott would appear indifferent to the idea that there was room for his work and Blomkamp's to coexist in the same universe.
A question from Sparrow Tony. He says, what do you think of the project that Neill Blomkamp started for Alien number 5 and with the return of Sigourney Weaver in it?
Well, there was never a script. It was an idea which was evolved on, I think, a 10-page pitch. And I was meant to be part of the producer on that. And it didn't evolve. Fox decided they didn't want to do it, so that was it. So I was already on to, I think I'd done Prometheus and I was already planning Covenant, so don't know.
That's never gonna happen.
I don't think so, no.
Whether or not Scott used leverage to make a power play is unknown, but what is known is that pre-production on Alien 5 had now all but ceased, and Weaver would now fulfill her obligation to film the Avatar sequels, and Blomkamp would see his name attached to an upcoming RoboCop Returns sequel.
I think the part of Hicks is just a beautifully written part of this very cool, Marine with great heart and strength and intelligence. In Neill Blomkamp's sequel to Alien, you see a lot more of them together. So you guys would like to see? Well, it'll happen. We have to wait till after Prometheus 2 is made, and then we get to start it. There are a lot more challenges in Neill's sequel, but I can't discuss it. But it was really fun to. It's going to be very satisfying. I kind of felt like we left the character after 4. It was all going to end up on Earth, and I didn't want to end up on Earth. I just thought, Earth. So it seemed so mundane to me compared to the beauty of space. So, we kind of just left the whole story hanging, and I'd always sort of felt a little incomplete to me, like, And so when Neill Blomkamp started to talk to me about a sequel to this movie, I thought, gosh, that would be so great to know that Ripley has a resting place, kind of, eventually. And wouldn't it be great to end the series like that? Not that the other two didn't happen, but that they're sort of parallel. You know, I love them all, but I just thought, you know, you can't. The filmmaker has to be inspired by what he's inspired by, and what he grew up with, and I think wore the tapes out of, were Alien 1 and 2 in South Africa. So, anyway, we'll see what happens.
Actor Lance Hendrickson was asked if he was involved to play another incarnation of the android Bishop, and if he knew whether or not the sequel was still happening.
We don't know that. We don't know that that's happening, especially not with Blomkamp. I haven't heard anything recently. I think that Ridley Scott was taking too long to make up his mind or to pull the trigger on it. So that Blomkamp just said, I'm going to go make movies, man. I can't wait around forever.
In December 2017, Blomkamp would post more concept designs with the message, just going through the volume of art created for this never-to-be-made Alien sequel. From environments to characters to set design, we did a lot, mostly over 2015. This would show the corporation's uniforms and accessories as drawn by character artist Callum Alexander Watt. Watt would later say, "My first costuming work was for Neill Blomkamp's unmade Alien project. I think he had seen my work on Alien Isolation and wanted to tap into the future/retro styling." In December 2017, Blomkamp would share more concept art. A Geoffroy Thorenz piece featuring Alien climbing up a ventilation shaft as a Marine waits atop, and a second one by renowned concept artist Paul Chadderson. Painting over 3D work by the talented artist Tyribian Ellingson was of a UD-4 utility dropship, the one primarily used by the United States Colonial Marine Corps, seen stationary in a hangar. In April 2020, Ellingson would release previously unseen concept designs featuring a sky crane variant on the dropship. Ellingson's credits include design work on Avatar, Pacific Rim, Blomkamp's Elysium, and sequels to Hellboy and Blade, and he would work as a conceptual designer in pre-production and was specifically selected by Blomkamp to be one of a handful of designers tasked with bringing his vision for the film to life. Here is Ellingson speaking briefly on his time on Blomkamp's pre-production to the Talking Bay 94 Star Wars podcast.
Neill's project, like if there was one more thing I could add to my life that I really, really wanted to have happen, it was really to be connected to the Alien franchise in a big way. I actually was involved with Alien 3 and was all set to go to England to work with David Fincher on that. And then at the last minute, there was an issue that arose out of with the studio and Industrial Light and Magic doing the effects, which had to do with Fincher being from Marin County. That was in his home turf, and I think the studio didn't want him up there on his own. Yeah. But that was the closest I'd come. Right. And then, of course, when Neill was developing his project, I was super enthusiastic about it. Yeah. And I actually feel like we worked over the course of a summer, maybe 3 months, which was a pretty long haul, doing like done pictures a lot longer, but those are actually ones that are going to get, they're going into production. But this was all part of a pre-production phase. And I was extremely disappointed because not only did I love what Neill was trying to do, but I thought that our collaboration, because we'd collaborated before, it was like we hit the perfect pitch. Like I was so proud of the work, and I actually was doing the same thing there. I was actually going like, I can't believe this is going to happen. Yeah. I mean, I was just so. What's the Mars movie he did with Matt? With
Martian,
Matt
yeah.
Martian. It was so successful.
Yeah.
And it seemed like now he's all teeing up science fiction again.
Right.
And, and I think that, but I know I think Neill was very heartbroken about it.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm not talking about any of its content, but the likelihood of that coming back now seems very unlikely.
Special effects wizard Alec Gillis from Studio ADI would give an interview saying, I said to Neill, why aren't you doing this all digitally? Because if it's biomechanical and harder edged, it lends itself to digital. And he said, I want a real man on set because it forces you into a certain way of shooting that would be more like what Ridley did in the first film. If it's all digital, I won't have those parameters to work within, and it's going to end up looking like something different, and I don't want that. I want it to look like Ridley Scott did it. That's how he thinks, and I guarantee you there's no studio executive in the world that would say that, because they don't see things in that specific and nuanced kind of way. Here's Gillis, together with David Woodruff, speaking to Alien vs. Predator Galaxy, lamenting the loss of the chance to work on Alien 5.
Alien 5, we were brought in for a while to work with Neill Blomkamp on his Alien 5-ish story. To say any more than it's like Neill had a great idea. Neill had he was in the right place at the right time with the right people, and still it did not happen. So the prospects of it happening are so remote that there's no reason.
Neill is one of our fave directors, and he's got great ideas, and I have no doubt that everybody would have loved his Alien 5, but it's all kind of under wraps until he says so.
Mm-hmm.
In February 2018, Carlos Huente, the phenomenal artist and renowned creature designer, would temporarily put up images he designed during Blomkamp's pre-production. Huente had already produced volumes of work that had been used in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and would label his work with the caption, "For a project that never got made." Obviously unsuccessful creatures that wouldn't have functioned all that well, which makes you wonder what these were for. Well, all I can say is they were for a version of a storyline that never got made. So not for Covenant or Prometheus, but for something else. The artist would allude to the fact the work was similar to what he'd done on Jurassic Park 4. It seemed likely that Weyland-Yutani had been experimenting and creating and weaponizing an array of xenomorph hybrids that were being kept in a secure enclosure. Blomkamp didn't say a lot about why his project was over. He later tweeted, "I've moved on. What I meant was that I wish there was a way for fans to see some of what we had designed. It was an amazing chance to work in the world Ridley and James Cameron created and collaborate with Sigourney." But the subject was one that would arise during interviews.
I basically worked on Alien for I met Sigourney on Chappie, and I had a different idea for an Alien film that I wanted to make. I mean, that's probably my favorite franchise, I suppose. I hate the word franchise. I hate anything that quantifies things financially. But I was obsessed with Alien and Aliens, and they probably made me want to get into film. And then, so I had this idea for a story set in the world of those two first films that was not a continuation of James Cameron's. It was just in the world of it, and it had a totally different character that was the lead character. Because my assumption was Sigourney just would never make another one. And then I told her about it on Chappie, and she was like, no, I actually would make another one because I felt like Ripley's story didn't end correctly. So I was like, oh, okay, that's amazing. So I went back to Vancouver, and while I was editing Chappie, I started to think about what I would do with Sigourney as basically a sequel to James Cameron's film. And I spent about a year working on it with only Sigourney knowing, and I hired one really awesome concept artist, and then who basically we put together essentially a script and all the artwork, and that's what I went to 20th Century Fox with, and they seemed really into it, and then Ridley came on as a producer, and then it just unraveled. It's very difficult to speak about on several levels because it's like Ridley created Alien. It was something that inspired me deeply. I got into film because of it. Everything that happened with my script and with the way the film collapsed, it's like it's hard to talk about it without it seeming like I'm kind of bashing him, which is like one of my idols to get into film. Do you know what I mean? It's a super strange psychological place, but films go down in Hollywood all the time, and it's like that's just essentially I think what happened, and it sucks for me, and it's not that it sucks for Sigourney. I mean, it's not going to make any difference to her, but I think that she really did like the story because it allowed Ripley it really felt like a cool third film.
In 2019, even more quite stunning art by Farzad Vararamyan, titled Alien 5 Design Sketches, would appear online. The art was dated August 2015, with the artist saying, "In 2015, Studio ADI asked me to submit some quick concepts for genetically altered aliens for Neill Blomkamp's Alien movie. This one was mutated with centipede inspirations, but I thought the interesting part of it was the flexible secondary alien mouth and tongue. The tongue could move like a snake. When you see the imprint upon the alien, reading Unit B 22, batch 9891560, along with the barcode and the number 13, it would heavily imply that the aliens are finally the property and stock of Weyland-Yutani. The company has seemingly achieved their goal of taking experimental control of the species to create biomechanical artillery, create weapons out of their biology, and ensure that humanity would remain the elite species in the universe." Artist Geoffroy Lorenz was later asked about his time working on the visual development of Alien 5, saying, "I was contacted by Neill Blomkamp in 2014 while he was finishing his film Chappie, because he wanted to collaborate with me to illustrate different projects, the first of which was Alien 5. It was at the beginning only a simple personal project, then Neill obtained the rights from Fox to direct the film. Alien 5 was part of the continuity of the second opus, disregarding the following films. Sigourney Weaver and Michael Biehn were assigned to take over their roles, and the script was set 25 years after Alien 2. It was very promising. However, Ridley Scott decided to modify Prometheus 2 for Alien Covenant, which put Alien 5 on standby. Then Fox was bought by Disney, and to date the Alien 5 project was aborted. It was a very enriching experience for me to have been able to participate in these projects, because I have never drawn as quickly as with him. His ideas abound at a sustained pace, which has resulted in me producing an average of one concept per day for very long periods, so that I can keep up with his pace. James Cameron's name would re-enter into conversation once the buyout of Fox by Disney was complete. Cameron's enthusiastic response to Blomkamp's idea had led the director to publicly toy with the idea of working as a producer to bring the project back to life.
Can you give Neill Blomkamp a call about aliens, just please?
I'm working on that, yeah. Okay. Oh!
Sigourney Weaver would also accept that the project had all but officially died, but still held out hope that Ellen Ripley's story would get the conclusion she deserved.
At a certain point, Neill Blomkamp had written a sequel to Aliens, which Fox wanted to do and paid Neill to write, and then Ridley Scott wanted to make his prequels first, so it was sort of put to one side, and Jim was actually has been very interested in producing that if we end up doing it, and so it's very incestuous, all of this. You never really can get away from it.
Well, I think everybody, because you could see the reaction in the room to this. We don't really want to let Ripley go. We don't. You may want to, and go back to the theater.
I have. 4 times.
The 5th time might be the charm, too. You never can tell.
Well, I think I did. I was very touched that Neill would write a script that showed us actually what happened to Ripley and kind of gave her an ending, because after the 4th one, I felt that I didn't want to outstay our welcome, so we never made the 5th one, which was a Joss Whedon script.
Instead of complaining or showing bitterness or speaking out against the industry's injustices, Neill Blomkamp would instead set up a self-sufficient, self-funded movie studio that sidestepped Hollywood altogether, producing a wave of high-budget, high-concept short films that are free to enjoy on Oat Studios' YouTube channel. The idea is to turn the best-received shorts into features, theoretically reducing the blind risk of the Hollywood process in the same way his initial features were developed. The studio's debut feature, Raka, featuring Sigourney Weaver, in a plot set in a near-future Earth, which is attacked by technologically superior and highly aggressive reptilian aliens. Blomkamp's final word on the topic would be an uploaded image of Alien sculpt from Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, saying how much he enjoyed working on Alien 5. Alec Gillis of ADI would say in response, "Happy he's letting you all see some of the design work we did. There's no doubt in my mind you would have loved what Neill had planned." Until further word from the director, or until perhaps the studio system and Blomkamp cross paths once again, and the project is reignited in one form or another, I guess we'll never know.